By the time a case gets through the New York eviction courts, the tenant owes 3 times as much rent. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fact that the courts in New York, the eviction courts, are backed up. Okay, they're very behind, and part of it is due to the fact they haven't hired enough judges. Okay, they don't have enough judges to hear all the cases, and I honestly believe that they are purposefully not hiring judges because they want to keep the courts going slow. They want to keep these tenants in these properties for as long as possible, so that they don't get evicted, because that is what their overall goal is. They had one of the longest, statewide and citywide eviction moratoriums, and they just, they push all these anti-landlord policies, and, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if, hey, the reason that they are slowing down this court process and that they're not hiring enough people and that there's this huge backlog is really to offer tenants even more time for free on the backs of the landlords, okay? Now, obviously, this hurts landlords a lot. And, I covered a story recently about the 96-year-old landlord who had been trying to evict the tenant for more than 3 years and still hasn't gotten this tenant out of their unit, okay? That is insane. It shouldn't take that long to get through eviction court. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think that the city of New York City is specifically, or New York State, I should say, is specifically, slowing down the court process, not hiring enough judges, etc., just so that they can keep these tenants in these units for longer and so that they won't be evicted? I mean, I already told you what I think, what else could it be? What could the real reasoning be? I mean, I know bureaucracy, I know that everything is super slow when you're dealing with the government in any way, but this is ridiculous, okay? Anyway, let's get into this article. So it's coming from the New York Post, and it says, "The shortage of judges in New York's housing court is causing massive pain for both tenants and landlords." Well, I'd be willing to bet that the tenants aren't feeling much pain from a slowdown in the eviction court. It's mostly the landlords. Anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. When Governor Kathy Hochul 2 weeks ago signed a bill expanding the number of judges in certain judicial districts and family court, one branch of the judiciary inexplicably wasn't included: housing court. The oversight is tragic because housing court is in severe need of additional judges, staffing, and resources to ease an enormous backlog. Without speedier resolutions of cases, both tenants and even more so landlords will face enormous hardship. Poor minority New Yorkers rely on housing court, yet so do small property owners like 96-year-old Bill Pantano, whose tenant hasn't paid in 3 years, primarily because of a deeply flawed housing court system that allows a tenant to take advantage of a nonagenarian who, I can barely pronounce that word, nonagenarian, we'll just say over 90-year-old, who depends on the rent for 80% of his retirement income. So yeah, if you notice, okay, the governor of New York said, hey, we're going to expand the number of judges for family court and for all these other courts, but completely ignored housing court. No surprise. Like I said, this is backdoor eviction moratorium. That's what they're doing in order to prevent tenants from being evicted for any reason. And the only thing it's really doing is it's hurting landlords. It's bankrupting landlords. It's putting people's retirement in question. Look at this guy here, 96 years old, who's been stuck paying the bills for some freeloading tenant for the last 3 years. Is that fair? Is that what they think is fair? Because you know what? At this point in time, there's no reason why people can't go back to work. There's no reason why these people should still be unemployed due to the pandemic. They're just abusing the system, and they need to get off of the dole, the government dole, and get back out there, get a job, pay your bills. That's what you need to be doing. All other New York courts have lifted COVID-ordered operational restrictions, yet housing court remains in a nearly 2.5-year state of suspended animation. Lawmakers also used the pandemic to impose what was for landlords a painful and unjust 2-year eviction moratorium. The emergency rental assistance program rollout proved disastrous, and an alarming shortage of judges and staff has only grown worse. Housing court had only been operating with only 50 or so judges before the pandemic. A retirement-induced exodus and COVID-related limitations that are still in play, but only for housing court, cut the number of cases being heard and worsened a backlog that has denied both owners and tenants their rightful day in court. So yeah, there's nothing here that says that, hey, they're not playing games. They're playing a game, okay? And they're not fooling anybody. I just want to let them know they're not fooling anybody. There's a reason they specifically excluded housing court from being dropped from all the COVID restrictions, because they are trying to keep these tenants in there. Now, my gripe with this is that, hey, you are not reimbursing these landlords for the money that is owed to them. You're not. So that means the landlords suddenly become a charity, a homeless shelter, and a social services provider because the government is unwilling to do the things that they promised they would do. Now, the landlord has to take all that financial responsibility on their own back, and that means they are screwed. Okay? Like I said, don't invest in states like New York where they are so anti-landlord. I did a poll recently, right, asking which state on the East Coast you think is the absolute worst for landlords, and more than 80% of respondents to my poll said it was New York. So that should give you an idea of just how bad it is up there. Get out. Get out while you can, okay? Even the other very tenant-friendly places are not as bad as New York is for landlords. Advocates like the Legal Aid Society claim that keeping cases out of housing courts protects tenants against eviction. The opposite is true. The court solves tenant-landlord disputes, and in the majority of non-payment cases, tenants wind up receiving rent relief through government programs that keep them in their homes while letting owners maintain their buildings and pay their bills. Yet lawmakers have now created a system in which tenants receive automatic eviction protection. ERAP places the burden on owners to provide housing almost essentially indefinitely, even when it's unclear if they'll ever see back rent. Pantano says his tenant has stiffed him on rent for 3 years straight. Oh man, did I lose my place? Yeah. Without fear of eviction merely by applying for ERAP. Yeah, and that's exactly right. They've created indefinite eviction moratorium. It might not be codified in law, but that's exactly what you create when you have a case where you can't get your case heard by court. There's not enough judges. There's no system to actually remove the tenant. You're just stuck. And yet they expect you to comply with the law. They wonder why do some landlords take the law into their own hands and do these illegal evictions? They should go through the courts. That's what they say, are you stupid or something? Go down to the court and find out how long that backlog is. Go talk to the landlords who, supposedly did these illegal evictions. Find out how long they weren't paid rent. Okay? Find out. And then tell me that, you were 100% unjustified. No, if I had a tenant who didn't pay me for, 2, 3, 4 years, and, the courts were so backlogged that I can't even have my case heard by the judge, that's injustice, okay? That is injustice, the opposite of justice. Meanwhile, the number of active cases is growing, per the tenant advocacy group Right to Counsel, even though new filings are declining, according to Princeton University's Eviction Lab. Why? Housing court is unable to handle the existing caseload due to the inadequate number of judges, limited hybrid work operation, and new post-pandemic procedural requirements. So I'm going to skip down a paragraph here, and it says here that the average arrears when these cases were filed was $10,085. The average amount owed at the time of the eviction, more than 3 times that figure, $33,695. Now, that is an important fact right there. Basically, these people filed evictions on their tenants, right? And the tenants only owed them about 10 grand. by the time they finally got through the eviction court and through the eviction process, the tenants owed them 3 times as much money because it took so long. And that's wrong, okay? That doesn't help the tenant. That doesn't help the landlord. That doesn't help anybody. The only thing it does is create this huge amount of debt. And what they expect is the landlord to eat that debt and, just go about their way. Well, my suggestion is if you go after these tenants, in some cases, landlords should sue those tenants. And, if that ruins their credit, so be it, because they didn't give a crap about you, okay?